Good to have you. US President Donald Trump is calling on Israel and Iran to halt attacks after the worst escalation of hostilities since the fragile ceasefire came into effect in April.
If you have noticed fuel prices twitching, shipping delays getting mentioned in the news, or just a general sense that something big is happening somewhere far away, this is probably why. Iran and Israel are exchanging direct military strikes again, and while that may feel like a distant headline, the last time this escalated, people felt it at the pump in their grocery bills and in global shipping routes within days. So it is worth understanding clearly what is happening and why. Let's start from the beginning. Back in April, a fragile ceasefire was brokered between Iran and Israel. It held imperfectly, but it held for several months. During that time, negotiations were ongoing. The United States under President Trump was reportedly working toward a broader peace deal with Iran. Things were tense, but they were at the table. That changed this week. Israel struck the southern suburbs of Beirut in Lebanon, an area with a strong presence of Hezbollah, the Iran-backed armed group. Iran said this was a direct violation of the ceasefire terms. Hezbollah then fired into northern Israel, expanding attacks on Israeli troops still stationed in southern Lebanon. Israel responded by striking apartments in a Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut, killing at least 2 people. Iran then launched missiles directly at Israel, the first time it had done so since April. Israel's Iron Dome intercepted the missiles. The Israeli military reported no casualties on the ground from the incoming fire. Israel then launched retaliatory strikes against military targets inside Iran, including what it described as air defense systems and a chemical complex in southwestern Iran. Explosions were reported in Tehran and several other Iranian cities. Iran's Revolutionary Guard called its missile launches the beginning of a full week of continuous strikes. The Houthi movement in Yemen, another Iranian-backed group, also fired a missile toward Israel and announced a ban on Israeli navigation in the Red Sea. So that is where things stand right now. Multiple fronts, multiple actors, all moving at the same time. Now, where does President Trump fit in all of this? This is where it gets complicated. Trump has been publicly pushing for a nuclear deal with Iran, and he reportedly urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to retaliate for the Iranian strikes. He went further, telling the Financial Times that Netanyahu will have no choice but to accept whatever deal the U.S. negotiates, because, in his words, he calls the shots. Israel retaliated anyway. That gap between what Washington wants and what is happening on the ground is something analysts are watching closely. It raises real questions about how much leverage the U.S. currently has over either side and what that means for any deal getting done. The UK's Foreign Secretary said publicly that the resumption of conflict is in no one's interest and called for immediate de-escalation. The British Prime Minister described himself as deeply concerned and urged all parties to return to a ceasefire. These are not unusual statements, but the fact that they are being made urgently by multiple governments simultaneously tells you something about how seriously this is being taken. Now let's talk about what this means practically. The most immediate concern for most people outside the region is energy. Iran is a significant oil producer. Any prolonged conflict involving Iranian infrastructure or any disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly a fifth of the world's oil passes, could push energy prices higher. That means petrol, diesel, electricity bills, and anything that gets transported, which is more or less everything. The Red Sea is the other pressure point. The Houthis have already announced a ban on Israeli navigation there, and in previous escalations, they disrupted global shipping lanes significantly. When ships are rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope instead of through the Suez Canal, journeys get longer, costs go up, and supply chains stretch. Consumers eventually feel that in prices. For people living in Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen, the human cost is immediate and real. Sirens, shelters, displacement, and fear. In Jerusalem, residents were woken by air raid sirens for the first time in 2 months. In Beirut, a city still recovering from years of crisis, another wave of strikes adds to an already exhausted population. Lebanon, in particular, is being described by analysts as a country paying the price for decisions made far above its head. Used as leverage in negotiations it has no real seat in. What happens next is genuinely uncertain, and anyone who tells you otherwise is guessing. There are still diplomatic channels open. The U.S.-Iran nuclear talks have not formally collapsed. Trump's public pressure on Netanyahu suggests Washington still wants a deal more than it wants a military escalation. But Israel's decision to strike back, despite that pressure, shows the limits of that influence. Iran's promise of a full week of strikes may be posturing designed to strengthen its negotiating position. Or it may not be. The distinction matters enormously, and right now, nobody outside those rooms knows which it is. What is clear is this: a ceasefire that held for months has broken down. Two countries with significant military capability are directly exchanging fire. Multiple regional actors are now involved. And the world's most important shipping lanes and energy corridors run directly through the middle of it. This is a story worth watching, not because of the politics, but because of what it quietly does to the cost of living, the stability of supply chains, and the daily lives of millions of people who never asked to be part of any of it.